We've got both Beverly Hills and Vanderpump Rules that we want to cover today. So let's jump right into it. Dan, did either of these stand out to you as maybe more compelling? Where would you like to start?
I can start with either one. I watched Vanderpump Rules first, and then I watched the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And so I couldn't help but compare Real Housewives to Vanderpump, I think because I had watched that one first. And I guess in a summary, Vanderpump seemed more real to me than Real Housewives did. There were some things I noticed in Real Housewives that just was like, this is obviously staged and just not real.
Let's use that as a launching point here. What stood out to you as feeling maybe inauthentic in Beverly Hills?
I think the biggest thing was the episode that we watched. There was a scene where I think it was Garcelle.
He was so happy.
Got it.
They were doing
you can join us
a video for a GoFundMe charity, Cyber Smile, I think it was called. Something about cyberbullying. But in this episode, they were recording a video, and we could see her other son, Jade, I think was his name, holding up cue cards for her to read from, and the other guy to read from. And they got the video done, and there were some kind of jokes in there. Drop the card too soon, that kind of stuff. And then when they got up to leave, I could see there's a tripod with a camera and a teleprompter right there.
Teleprompter, yeah.
Like you don't need the cue cards. You don't need the cue cards if there's a teleprompter there. Which also, when they were doing it, I was like, "What? This is all on TV. They have these cutaways with talking heads. Surely they have video equipment there. Why are they doing this with the phone and some newer LED panels and like that?" So I was like, that's weird. And then I saw the teleprompter. I was like, oh, they did use that. They just staged this other part for it. So that was one of the things that stood out to me. I was like, okay.
Yeah, totally. So I want to start us off with a little segment called Housewives in a Hurry. We're going to put like a 20-second timer on, and I just want you to run through the episode and in terms of what stood out to you. And I'll start the time now.
Well, I mean, initially it was there was a Mother's Day party going on that was planned with a caterer, which I thought was a very elaborate Mother's Day party. And then there's a lot of different conversations with Sutton rides her horse for the first time. Was it at the 20 seconds already?
Yeah. That's 20 seconds.
That was fast. Okay.
Yeah, no,
I only got into like the first few minutes.
Yeah, no, but that's good. It kind of keys in on what themes are sort of front of mind as soon as you watch the episode. I'm curious if either of you guys found any of the storytelling choices or any symbolism that you wanted to call out before we get into it.
Can we talk about Sutton's horse again? Because I'm still like wondering why Sutton's making her whole life about a horse.
Trot, shall we? Okay.
I think I touched this last episode, but I feel like we didn't really get into it. What does this horse represent for Sutton?
That will never be the same.
That it's the thing that she's trying to rebuild her identity around, seemingly.
Yeah. Do you have any?
I'm not sure. I mean, I guess it's like a sense of freedom, right? Like she's like, she's now single. So I guess that's like horses traditionally do represent freedom in the Western imagination. I guess that's maybe like the idea of being able to ride it, and also it just being like a valuable piece of property that she has, and just being able to look at it gallop free and under the huge California skies and feel that, drink in that sense of all American freedom. I literally don't know. I'm spitballing here, but she goes on and on about this fucking horse, about this is like her project, what she has to do, wants to make sure it's on camera. Why is the horse so important to Sutton?
The impression I got from that. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I mean, again, I've only watched this one episode, but the impression I got was I think she mentioned something about how she had horses as a kid in Texas or something. And
there you go. Rosebud right there.
Yeah. So that's what the impression, what really confused me about that though, was the episode mentioned that it was her first time riding the horse, but then she mentions when she's talking with, Kyle there. I think after the horse ride, which was just a few seconds. I don't know how long it actually was, but in the episode, it's just a few seconds. And then Sutton's talking with Kyle about how, I think Kyle asked how long it's been since the divorce, and Sutton's like, well, it's been 6 or 7 years. And I'm like, wait a minute. But this was something to like help her get over that. But this was 6 or 7 years ago. Maybe I'm missing a lot, but it just seems like that's a while ago to just now have this thing to help you get over it.
Yeah, it seems like a very long period of mourning. You're right. Mm-hmm. I think so in terms of the narrative of this season, just last week we finally saw her kind of mourning her previous life, and we're seeing her experience a bit of a rebirth. So I think both of those reads are really aligned with what I had, and I'd picked out this scene as well. And one of the things that really stood out to me, and I think this ties in with Dylan, your read of the horse, representing freedom, is the sound up that they chose to include of Kyle when she walked in, talking about how Sutton looks uncomfortable on this horse.
Are we certain Sutton's even ridden a horse before?
Yeah, he's bumpy.
How she's trying to navigate this new freedom in a awkward and uncomfortable way, which is really what we're seeing her do as she's pursuing new relationships and the dating scene, and really just awkwardly trying to discover what her her post-divorce life is like.
Yeah, that's true. It definitely is an awkward transition for her, and you're right. They underline that in the edit by pointing out that she's not that good at riding this horse. Maybe she needs a lot more practice. Maybe she needs to figure out how to feel more free. Do you think it's a good thing or a bad sign that Sutton shows up to the Champagne and Diamonds Mother's Day brunch fucking lit, just wanders in shit-faced with a roadie, immediately starts pouring herself a huge glass of vodka, and then drunkenly realizes how much she's poured her a glass and starts pouring it down the sink? Is this a good sign that she's feeling so free now, that she's so happy about how her date went, that she's just fucking cutting loose? Or is this a sign that things are worse than we think with Sutton, that she's spiraling?
Yeah, she's just fitting into that cowboy lifestyle. I think she's just easing into it. I don't know.
Yeah, the impression I got with that was that she's not moving very fast. I mean, you mentioned the date, and again, based on my memory of that, I think they mentioned that the first date was a month ago, and then this one in this episode is the second date. So a month time in between just tells me that it's probably not moving so fast. Yeah. And, which seems to be on character if she's still mourning the loss of, a divorce from 6 or 7 years ago, that she's just not moving fast. So maybe the drinking is a part of that too, where she still has some stuff to get over.
Yeah, she just seems like she's stumbling through life looking for a handrail.
Literally walking up the steps. She was literally looking for the handrail to get up there. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Let's get into our highlights. Dan, what were your highlights from this episode?
I think really what stood out to me, and this kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier, where I watched Vanderpump Rules first, and so I couldn't help but compare. But this seemed really chaotic to me. I had a hard time following the storylines in this one a lot more, just because I think they tried to do a lot more. There's so many characters. Well, there's 7 main characters, and then that's just hard to follow with all these different storylines, especially for somebody who's like me who hasn't watched all these other storylines to figure out what all is going on.
Especially being dropped in at the end of a season like you are here. This is the 16th episode.
Yeah. That's true. I didn't know it was the end of the season until at the end. They're like, oh, and the season finale next week. Yeah. But I think with that said, I think something that really stood out to me as a highlight that I noticed different. Maybe I just didn't notice it in Vanderpump Rules, but I noticed with Housewives, they do have the little motion graphics bumper when, okay, we're shifting to this other person's storyline now. We're doing this, where it's not, they do some back and forth without really doing that. But I appreciated that they're like, okay, now we're really focusing on this person's storyline. And now we're really doing this, because that helped me follow a little bit more, rather than just assuming that this was somebody that I don't know yet that's still involved in this person's storyline. I had to go look up who the lady was that Sutton was talking to at the horse thing, that was actually one of the other housewives, to know that.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
So things like that. Like, I don't know who's involved in what storyline.
Totally. Yeah. Dylan, what were your highlights from this?
You're not going to be surprised that I just like every time Erika's on screen. I like seeing Erika with her therapist. We've seen them before, because it always feels like her therapist is administering the Voight-Kampff tests to her.
The tortoise lays on its back, its belly baking in the hot sun, beating its legs, trying to turn itself over, but it can't. Not without your help. But you're not helping.
What do you mean?
Like, just like trying to determine if there's like any shred of humanity inside this this woman, and she's the best. She had my favorite little moment in the episode where Sutton's talking about like her date and how great it was, and drunkenly slurring about like how we went to the Surly Goat, and Erika just leans over and is like, it sucks.
Oh, it was really fun, actually. We went to the Surly Goat.
Horrible.
Oh.
Just like, okay, Erika, thanks for letting us know. Just had to get that in there, didn't you?
Yeah, she was on fire again this episode. I loved her. Like, I think it was in a confessional where she's like, "Oh, no one complains about my blowjobs. I don't have a small esophagus." Like, just the callback to the esophagus storyline from the beginning of the season. So funny.
Can I ask? Speaking of Erika, something that stood out with her. Maybe I can get your feedback on this too, because I was curious as I was watching this. There's a scene where Erika is talking to Dorit, and she mentioned something that Dorit said in a dinner. I think Erika is saying, "I expected," at the very end of the episode, Erika expects people to say sorry, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then there's a flashback that goes back to a dinner in 2020 with a single sentence that Dorit said, and this is apparently why Erika is mad at her. Which again, I don't know the timelines of these things, but this is like a single. I don't know what I said at a dinner 4 years ago. To be able to call these things back. That was another thing where I was like, okay, there's some of these things are staged and pulled back, and that aspect of things. Or maybe, I'd be curious to hear what you guys think. If I was reading into that a little bit too much, that this is obviously fake to pull something from a 2020 dinner.
I think it seems like she is legitimately dwelling on this. And so I guess for context on this, Erika Jane was married to Tom Girardi, who is like a lawyer that defrauded victims of like airline crashes of millions and millions of dollars. And then he got caught, and her life basically fell apart. And there's all these questions swirling around, like, did she know that all this money that they had was the result of defrauding all these victims, and people like expecting her to have so much more like empathy and compassion. And she got really hung up on this one like civil trial or one element of a civil trial that surrounded these earrings that she had, which were like $750,000. And so that was in litigation, and she just she didn't even win that part. It just got like moved to another like venue or something like that. And she thinks that she's like being like vindicated. She thinks that she should get an apology, that everyone that was talking about that she probably knew, or that she should just turn these earrings over or whatever. She thinks that she deserves an apology from everyone. So it's really all about her like selfishness and trying to like just claw back at like getting some piece of the person that she used to be and some piece of her integrity back. I think that's why she's so hyper focused on it.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good explanation. And they do mention the earring. I remember that and her expecting.
Basically, I think it is realistic that she would still be hanging on to something that was said 4 years ago, because she's that kind of person.
Then more power to her. I'm trying to remember what I had for breakfast this morning. If you can remember that from 4, that's great. But My mind is not realistic. Like, I can't remember that.
Yeah. I mean, she's kind of like a real monster. Like, she probably should have just let these earrings go and like been like, okay, I'm like making restitution towards the victims. But her focus is like solely on like selfish personal motivations, and it makes for great television, but it doesn't mean she's a great person.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. Okay.
Yeah. The evil's coming from the same place as the music. Did either of you guys have any other highlights from this episode?
I found it kind of lightweight, to be honest. I didn't find it the most exciting, juicy episode compared to Vanderpump Rules, where I thought there's a lot more meat on that bone.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about Vanderpump Rules. Before we do that, let's give our stars for this episode of Beverly Hills. Pick one to three people that you thought were real standouts, and we'll start with you, Dan.
I think for me, it was Kyle. I really liked the scene where she was talking with her. I don't remember if she was talking with her husband or if she was talking with somebody else, but she was really pushing to be independent of her husband's fortune with her own career. It sounded like he was supportive of that. And again, I don't know the context, but I got the impression that I think it was Sutton was not that way. And so I don't know. I just really, that stood out to me as something like she's really just trying, be her own person and have a good relationship. And I mean, be independent, and I'm all for that. So I thought that was good.
Yeah, totally. This, like, we are seeing Kyle become more independent this season, and the off-camera dialogue was all these questions surrounding her relationship and with her husband Mo, and just watching the scenes that we get between her and her husband together. It doesn't like. I'm not saying that none of that talk is like true or whatever, but it just doesn't have like that urgency or that tension that you were expecting from a relationship that's like truly in trouble. The way that they were able to like discuss things, they were at odds over certain things, but it didn't seem overly troubled to me. But that was just my read on it. But yeah, I agree. I think like we saw a lot of Kyle wrestling with, what independence means in terms of like what she's seeking. Like, because I think you're right. She is seeking independence, but she is scared of what that means for her family. Did you have any other stars there, Dan?
No, she was really kind of what stood out to me there.
Cool. Dylan?
Yeah, I do like that scene with Kyle and Maurizio, actually, just because there's kind of an interesting tension to it, I thought, and it was slightly awkward in some ways. And I do think that Craig, to what you're saying, like there's probably more issues with the marriage that they're kind of not ready to address, and they're kind of have like agreed to do this scene, but they feel like they're kind of circling it around it and just keep going back to like just talking about their businesses because that's what they want to talk about, and it's easier to talk about it and be like, oh, new offices opening up, everything going great, producing a new show, right? Yeah. But I feel like there's kind of like a weird tension going on at the same time where there are things that are just not being addressed that I almost feel like they're both kind of doing a bit of a Mexican stare down, being like, are we going to talk about the real issues or aren't we? Well, we've got the cameras going and we're filming this moment, and I feel like they kind of don't. And there's a bit of a letdown to that, but it's also interesting just to kind of, to me anyways, to feel like there's like a certain tension around the unaddressed things that in there. So let's give Kyle a second star for that scene, but I think Sutton's got to take first star because this has been her show lately, and she's a lot of fun. Let's give a third star to, I can't remember his name, but the guy that Sutton was going on a date with. Let's give him a star. Yeah.
Steve was his name,
yeah.
right?
Steve, pretty camera ready. He's ready to. He's got his lines ready. He's ready to be a bit of a self-deprecating goofball, taken to her to a little bit of a dive bar, looking to have some fun. Maybe more excited to be on camera than he is actually excited to be with Sutton. Not too sure, but nice to have him there. He's got a bit of a camera ready personality. Let's see some more of Steve. Sure, I like him.
Yeah, I think that he seemed like legitimately into Sutton or at least it seemed less about being in front of the camera than a lot of the people that we've seen come in as potential like suitors for other housewives. So I liked him. I thought, yeah, he was like awkward but fun and really matched her energy. So yeah, I agree with your going off the board for the Steve pick. My picks for this would be Sutton is my number one pick. I think she's just been giving so much this season. Also, Erika is just a real like an enigma. she's just amazing to watch, and this real monster that we're seeing at the bottom of the hill on her character arc. I think it's a really compelling thing. We don't often get to see these people who are these true like monstrous villains. They like to exit at the top and not get like shown on camera when they're at their bottom. And the fact that we're getting it with Erika, I think is really compelling. So love seeing her. And yeah, Kyle is the other one for all the reasons that you guys stated.